Set in the late Victorian era 19th century total war with 30 factions to choose from, with more than 16,000 downloads on ModDB. Let's dive in and welcome back to Factions and Starting Positions, this time Steam and Steel v1.11. So we're going to begin with the first faction in Factions and Starting Positions, and the first one is the Boer Republic. Boer Republic is located in South Africa. The year is 1860. And here we're going to see a very unique faction that I'm pretty sure you're not going to find in any other mod. This makes this faction a unique faction on Steam and Steel. Let's find out what we got here. So the first thing we can see is that the capital city is Pretoria and the faction leader is President Andreas. Now, a note in here. Every time that you load a faction, you're going to get different stats for the actual characters. Because of these, I'm not going to go straight into the how many stars or how many points does the character has, because in your case is going to be completely different. However, we're going to see who is the actual leader and who is the heir or supposed heir, because that's something that is not going to change. So we have with the Boer Republic 2 regions controlled and 2 generals. Now here we see the guy that is going to be the faction leader. It doesn't matter if you load 100 times the same faction, this is not going to change, and the prime minister is going to be this guy. Now this picture here, as far as I understand, is very generic. Then we have here the settlements. We have Pretoria and we have Bloemfontein. These are the only 2 settlements that you control with the Boer Republic. In agents you have nothing. As you can see, the Zulus are playable in this campaign. Now we find ourselves in the Balkan region on the Aegean Sea, and this is the Kingdom of Greece. With the Kingdom of Greece we have the capital city Athens. It is actually a very small faction. The faction leader is King Otto, and over here in Greatest General we see that we have Crown Prince Georgios. The regions controlled are 1, and we have 2 generals in our command. Let's go here and see the actual things that are not going to change, which is King Otto, faction leader, we already said. Here we have Crown Prince Georgios and Admiral Elias. Now eventually I think that here in agents we're not going to see anything, and in settlements we just have Athens. A note here. Even though these stats are going to change, there's something of note that I have to show you about the mod.
Your orders, number 1.
If we go here and we see King Otto, we're going to see that there's a little bit of a change in this mod. For example, here, instead of chivalry, we have popularity. Instead of authority, we get stature, and instead of piety, we get uptightness in this mod. The other thing that changes here is the name of the retinue, that in this mod is called the staff. And here you can have a look and you can make yourself an idea of what are you going to get when you get the staff. For example, here we have a tutor and a mentor. The other interesting thing, and for that I'm going to go to the faction heir, and you can see the different pictures here that we have for the different staff. Let me go again here.
Name thy enemy, Lord.
Over here we are going to see that, for example, there's these 3 traits that are in the same actual line. So in this mod you have intelligence, charisma and vitality, and this is going to be something different from other mods. So just for you to take that into account. And another thing that you can see is that again we get authority here instead of the actual popularity, but in popularity as I said before and I repeat, we have the actual helmets that are for chivalry. Instead,
Who do I face?
with Prince Georgios we have authority, and you can see that we have the schools that are part of Dread. For this faction we find ourselves in the area of Kabul, and exactly that, Afghanistan is a faction that you can play in Steam and Steel. For Afghanistan we have the capital city Kabul. Faction leader is Sultan Muhammad. Then we have 2 generals and we have 2 regions controlled. Let's find out what we get here. Over here we see Sultan Muhammad. He's the faction leader.
As my son
This guy is a 55-year-old. And then we have Crown Prince Arslan. The 2 settlements that we get with Afghanistan are Kabul and Kandahar. And hidden agents, we find nothing. Now we move ourselves into Central Europe, and the mod gets more exciting as we advance. In here we have the German Empire. For the German Empire, the capital city is Berlin. We have Chancellor Karl as the faction leader, and the greatest general is listed here, Friedrich Karl von Witzendorf. We have 3 regions controlled, 8 generals, and the 3 regions are the cities. Let's go and see. So, over here we see Chancellor Karl with stats that are randomly generated, as I mentioned before. He is the faction leader. Albrecht von Moltke is a general here, and then we have Friedrich Karl von Witzendorf, that in this case is now the most powerful general. We have Admiral Georg, Maximilian here, Rodolf, Georg von Kleist, Field Marshal Heinrich, and Venno the general. Over settlements, we are going to find Berlin as the most perhaps populated city within this faction. We're going to have Cologne, which is Köln, and Königsberg. Another amazing faction of this mod, and a very interesting faction indeed that you can play in this time period, is France. So over here we see that the capital city is Paris. The faction leader is Emperor Napoleon, and we have 11 generals at our disposal and 7 regions. Over here we see Emperor Napoleon, who is the faction leader. We have some admirals, and some of the generals are historical, some of them are simply randomly generated, but here you can see some of them. Over here we see the settlements, and here we see plenty of them. Over here we see Paris, we see this area of Bordeaux, we see Lyon, so on and so forth. We have, in this instance, an area located in Africa. We have Algiers as well, in North Africa, and we have Saigon in Indochina, nowadays Vietnam. In terms of agents, we see nothing. Another great faction that you're going to find in Steam and Steel is obviously Italy, because if you play well, you can form modern Italy. Over here we have the Kingdom of Italy, and we see the capital city is Milan. The faction leader is King Victor Emmanuel, and we have 5 generals at our disposal and 3 regions controlled. Let's have a look at who are the other military forces that we have here apart from the faction leader, which is King Victor Emmanuel, and we have a beautiful picture of the king. We have Crown Prince Umberto, which is the faction heir, and Admiral Vincenzo, Enrico, Gustavo, and Felice. Over here we are going to see the settlements, which are Milan, Naples, and Palermo. Over agents, we see nothing. Another fantastic faction that we can find in this Victorian era mod is the Qing Empire, which is the Empire of China. And over here we see a beautiful, completely different UI in which we are going to feel more like in Asia. Everything looks very, very nice. So let's find out here what we got with the Qing Empire. With the Qing Empire, we have the capital city of Peking. The faction leader is Emperor Xianfeng, and we have a general that is Jing Guangdong. In this case, this is going to be the greatest general. Now, this faction is huge because you have 17 generals and 14 cities, which are regions controlled with China. With China, we see over here Emperor Xianfeng, which is the faction leader. Let's have a look at this one. So here you can make yourself an idea of what we got with a Asian king, for example, Prince Tongxi over here, and here we are going to find all of the military forces when playing with China. In terms of settlements, we're going to have plenty of them, so let's visit each of them. We have Peking. Hearing agents, we see nothing. So let's continue here in Steam and Steel. The next faction is the Netherlands. As always, the Netherlands begins as a main city in Amsterdam. So let's go ahead and see that the capital city is Amsterdam. As I just mentioned, the faction leader is Prime Minister William. In this case, the greatest general is George Hendrik, and we are going to control 3 regions, 6 generals, which those 3 regions are cities. You're going to say, hey, do we have 3 regions, but we see just Amsterdam in the mainland? We're going to check that. For the Prime Minister William, we're not going to go exactly on what he has, because as you may know, every time that you load the game, it might be different. However, the general, meaning the names of the generals, are the same all over. So let's have a look at those generals over here. Okay, beautiful. Then we're going to check if we have agents. We don't have. Here we see the 3 settlements, the 3 actual cities. We have Amsterdam. The other region is Batavia over here. The public order is not good in both places here. This is located in Oceania. So here we have Batavia and Makassar as well in Indonesia. The next faction in Steam and Steel is Russia. Now, the capital here is St. Petersburg. This is the time by which St. Petersburg is going to be the main city of this faction. Let's go ahead and check this out. St. Petersburg, and then we have Emperor Alexander Nikolaevich. Then we have 24 generals and 22 cities, which are the regions controlled. Now, this faction in this mod is huge because it's actually representing the whole territory of this huge country. We see that we have even the possibility to reach Kola here. And then if we go to the other side, that is colindant with China and Japan, we can see even the navy of Russia over here. We can see as well down here that, wow, this is amazing. This is one of the most amazing Russias that you will ever see in a single mod out there. Look at this. Look at the size of these. There you go. And we reach Kola here. Okay, so we already know that this thing is amazing. So now we can go and see the Emperor Alexander Nikolaevich as the faction leader. As the faction heir, we had Alexander Alexeyevich, which they actually have the same picture, okay? And then you are going to see all the generals here. Fedorovich, Ivanovich, Petrov, down there you go. So feel free to be happy and amazed with this faction. There you go. Over here we see in agents nothing, as always, and here we see all of these settlements. We start with St. Petersburg, so I'm going to go from the first one down to others, so you are going to be able to see each of them. Next faction is the Indian Princely States. The Indian Princely States are those states that have not been taken by the British India Company. So let's go ahead and see what this all about. We have Bangalore as the capital city. The faction leader is Maharaja Sher, and we have 2 regions controlled and 2 generals. These are the actual 2 generals, and then we have an admiral. We have, as I said before, Maharaja Sher, Prince Ahavapal, and Admiral Chamundaraj. We don't have agents in here, and in settlements we can see that we have 2. It's a very small faction, to be honest, by the fact that India is a huge country. However, here we see Bangalore as the capital, as I mentioned before, and then Jaipur as the other settlement that is basically in the middle of these other settlements that are part of UK, or the British India Company, more exactly. Now we have the Tokugawa Shogunate, and yes, the Tokugawa Shogunate is a faction in Steam and Steel. It's pretty nice because this means that we can get even Fall of the Samurai in Steam and Steel. Let's go ahead and check this. This guy has the capital Akita. Faction leader is Shogun Iemochi, and we control 4 regions with the Tokugawa Shogunate and 4 generals. The faction leader, which is called the Shogun here instead of faction leader, is Shogun Iemochi. And then the faction heir, which is located in Kyoto, very clever, is Mige Shogun Yoshinobu. So these are the actual military forces. It's not much, but it's very interesting. In agents we have nothing, and in settlements we have, let me go here, we have Akita, we have this one here in the north, we have Edo, and we have Kyoto. Now with the Khanate of Kokand, which is pretty much at the south of the Russians. There's down here Bukhara, which is actually the Emirate of Bukhara, which is listed here as an independent or rebel nation. We see here that with this faction we have Tashkent as the capital city, and the faction leader is Khan Muhammad. Then we have here regions control 2 and generals 2. Let's find out who are those generals. Khan Muhammad, the faction leader, and the faction heir. That's all. And then we have no agents, obviously, and in settlements, pretty much the capital Tashkent and this one over here. Okay, for the next faction we have the Kingdom of Spain. Kingdom of Spain is a mix in between European possessions and colonial ones. We got Madrid as the capital city. The faction leader is Prime Minister Alfonso. We have 6 regions controlled and 8 generals. Let's have a look. This is the guy that is the faction leader, as I mentioned before. And then down here we're going to see who is the faction heir, which is named here Captain General Isidro. This is going to be always the faction heir. Now you can have a look at all the actual generals and military forces that are at your command with Spain. Here on agents we see nothing of note. In settlements we have the following. This is the Philippines, and here we have Cuba with the settlement of Havana. Here we have the Emirate of Oman. So the capital city is Muscat. The faction leader is Sultan Bargash. We have 2 regions controlled and 2 generals. Another note here is that when you get the Islamic nations, you're going to have a completely different UI, as you may already noted. So here we have Sultan Bargash, the Crown Prince Thuwaini, which is the faction heir, and 2 admirals. Nothing of note in agents. And over here we see the 2 regions, Muscat and Zanzibar. You can see here that when you go here and you hover here, this changes to a half moon. Very interesting detail. The next faction, which is another faction that is going to be very interesting, mostly because this is perhaps the first time that I have ever seen this faction on a Total War game. This is the faction of Thailand. So the capital city of Thailand is Bangkok. Faction leader is King Mongkut, and we have 2 regions controlled and 2 generals. Those generals are these. One is an admiral and the other one is the Crown Prince Chulalongkorn. In agents we have nothing of note, and settlements we have Bangkok and Luang Prabang. The next faction is the dynasty of Qajar of Persia. So here we have the capital city is Tehran, the faction leader is the Shah Nazir. We have 4 regions and 4 generals. Here we can see the military forces, which are the faction leader, as we mentioned before, which is Nazir. And then we have the faction heir, Mustafa, the Shahzada, and then we have 2 generals and 1 admiral. Again, nothing in agents, and settlements. We have Tehran as the capital city, and Tabriz, Bandar Abbas, and Isfahan. Then, of course, we have the Ottoman Empire. The Turks have their capital city in Constantinople. The faction leader is Sultan Murad. This is a very decent faction, very big, 12 regions controlled and 12 generals. Here we see Sultan Murad, the faction leader, Crown Prince Abdul as the faction heir, and we are now seeing the other generals and admirals that are at our disposal with the Turks. Again, in agents we have nothing, so let's have a look at the settlements. The next faction is the Sultanate of Morocco. The Sultanate of Morocco has as capital Fez. The faction leader is Sultan Muhammad, is listed here. 2 regions controlled and 2 generals. This is Sultan Muhammad as the faction leader. Then we have Crown Prince Abdallah, the faction heir, and 1 admiral. Again, nothing of note in agents. And then we have these 2 settlements. Returning to Europe, we're going to check now Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark. The capital city here is Copenhagen, and the faction leader is Prime Minister Christian. 1 region controlled and 2 generals. So far this is the tiniest faction ever. So with this small faction, as I mentioned before, this is the faction leader over here, and then we have the faction heir as Field Marshal Frederick, and 1 admiral. No agents, and the sole settlement that we can see here. The other are simply forts. And now we're going to see the faction that is called Sweden-Norway. The capital city of Sweden-Norway is Stockholm. The faction leader is Lord High Chancellor Magnus. We have 3 regions controlled and 5 generals. As I mentioned before, the faction leader is this guy over here, Chancellor Magnus, and then we have all of these as the generals. The faction heir is Field Marshal Helmer. Nothing in agents, and these are the settlements. Stockholm, the capital city of Sweden. We have Bergen here in Norway, and Trondheim in Norway. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Austro-Hungarian Empire is a huge country. This country has its capital in Vienna. The emperor is Franz Joseph, and we have 5 regions controlled and 5 generals. Even though we don't have as much as we can expect from this empire. It is, in this time period, a very big empire. So obviously we have the faction leader, Emperor Franz Joseph. We have the faction heir, Archduke Ferdinand Maximilian. And then we have the following generals and admirals. Nothing in agents, and these are the settlements. We begin with the capital city, Vienna. Now here is where the excitement begins, because what is a Victorian era without South American countries? In Steam and Steel we have the Empire of Brazil. The Empire of Brazil has been declared an independent empire from Portugal since 1922 in our history. In here, in 1860, the Empire of Brazil still exists, and we can play as this amazing country. So let's begin here and let's see what this empire can offer us. We have the capital city, Rio de Janeiro, and the faction leader is Emperor Pedro. Let's go ahead and see that. So, Emperor Pedro is the faction leader, the heir is Crown Prince Pedro. Then we have a general and an admiral. There's nothing here in agents, and we have 3 settlements. Even though the territorial extent of this country is huge, the developer of this mod decided to create just 3 actual settlements. Let's have a look at them. We have Rio de Janeiro, which is the capital city. We have here Salvador in the north. And in the center, we have Manaus. Now, a note here on Brazil here. There's the... we all know that in Brazil there's the Amazons. Jungle of the Amazons is huge. And it is actually represented in the mod. If you try to move troops here, there is going to be a complete mess, because this is a labyrinth. Another interesting thing about the Empire of Brazil is that the actual Kingdom of Portugal in mainland Europe is not listed as a faction. It is actually a rebel faction. Another exciting country in this mod is Mexico. Now here we see a very unique faction that perhaps you're not going to find in any other mod. I can say that perhaps you can find Mexico, as far as I know, in Brothers versus Brothers, which is not a medieval mod. You can check that in my channel if you're interested. But here we have Mexico. Let's have a look at this country. So we have the capital city is Mexico City, and the faction leader is Benito Juarez. We have 4 generals and 3 regions controlled. So the president is faction leader Benito. Then we have these 2 generals over here, and the faction heir Prime Minister Jose Maria. Down here we have an admiral. Then we have nothing in agents. So let's have a look at the 3 settlements. We have Mexico City. It's a huge settlement, as you can see. We have Monterrey in the north and Veracruz. This is where the mod gets more interesting as we advance. So let's go ahead and let's see the next one. And here we go with the Empire of Japan. These are the imperialists of Japan against the shogunate. Not only Steam and Steel has all of these exciting factions to play as, but you can play Fall of the Samurai as well. So here we have the Empire of Japan. The capital city is Kagoshima, and the faction leader is Emperor Hisamitsu. Regions controlled 1, generals 5. So here we see that this is the actual faction leader. It's located in Kagoshima. This is another general, and we have the faction heir Crown Prince Tadayoshi, and then we see the other generals and one admiral. No agents, and this is the only settlement down here in Kagoshima. We can see the detail and the difference in between the West and the Japanese and Chinese factions. We can clearly see attention to detail in this regard. The next country is the Union, which is actually United States of America. Over here we see that the capital city obviously is Washington, D.C. The faction leader is President Abraham Lincoln. We have 10 regions controlled and 16 generals. This is one of the biggest factions. So obviously, because this is the Victorian era, we have the American Civil War. And obviously, this is going to be a treat for all of you guys that love Victorian era in America. So here we see the faction leader, and we see Ulysses Grant, we see here Augustus, we see General Richard, and then we can go down here and see a lot of interesting guys here. We see Jefferson, we see McClellan, very interesting. No agents, of course. Let's have a look at the actual settlements. We have Washington, D.C. here, New York. Now, let's go ahead and let's zoom in a little bit so we can have a look at the difference in between the other countries. This faction has a very nice difference in terms of architecture, as you can see. So again, let's continue here. Let's go to Boston. Here we go. Let me just zoom out a little bit so we can see here. Now the country of United States is it's huge. You can even see Native American tribes over here as rebels. Let's continue here with Chicago. So there you have it, the beautiful United States of America. So now things are getting very, very interesting. We have a very unique country over here, and this is Peru. Peru is present in Steam and Steel. So let's have a look at this amazing first timer in Total War. So the capital city is Lima. The faction leader is President Enrique Cornelio. We have 2 regions controlled and 3 generals. Let's have a look at them. So this is the faction leader over here. You can see the picture. Then we have the faction heir as another prime minister. Now, most likely these guys, when you see the countries that are independent states on America, you're going to see that they are republics. So the actual faction heir, most likely, and as far as I can see, is going to be prime minister. So then we have 1 general and 1 admiral. Agents, nothing, and we have only 2 settlements. We have Lima here and Cusco over here. Now, this country is unique in Total War, so this is going to be a very interesting visit for all of you, and most likely the Victorian history buffs. As far as I can understand, this country is very, very difficult to get access to this country. So if you play here, you're going to be very safe, I believe, because down here there's a lot of mountains, and here we see the Amazons. Now here we have another fascinating country, Argentina. Now I cannot say the same in regard that this is a first-timer on a mod in Total War. Why do I say this? Because Argentina is actually present in Lusium Total War. And that is not the same with Peru. Peru in Lusium is still part of Spain. So let's see what we got here with this great and amazing country, Argentina. So let's see, capital city Buenos Aires and faction leader President Bartolome. So we see that we have one region controlled and two generals. Sadly, it's a very, very small country. Even Peru has one more region. So here we see the president, and the faction heir is Field Marshal Domingo. Over here we see no agents and just Buenos Aires as the actual capital city. And guys, finally, we are here with Great Britain, the United Kingdom. And this is the star of the Victorian era. So let's have a look at the glorious Empire of Great Britain, the most powerful faction in this mod. Over here we see that the capital city is London. The faction leader is Prime Minister George, and we have the greatest general, Francis Macready. We see that the regions that we control here are 22, and we have 28 generals. Let's have a look at this. So over here we see that the faction leader is this guy over here. We have the faction heir, which is dubbed Field Marshal, and this is the least of generals. We have nothing in agents. And now we're going to go around the world and see all the settlements of Great Britain. We cannot say that a Victorian era mod is completed without the Confederates. Let's have a look at the Confederate States, the arch enemy of the Union. So we have the capital city Richmond, you can see over here. The faction leader is President Jefferson. We have 5 regions controlled and 10 generals. President Jefferson as the faction leader, which is called a president. And then we have General Robert as the faction heir. Here we see all of the other generals present in this faction. No agents. And let's begin with Richmond as the capital city. And let's go through the other 4. And finally, guys, we are in South Africa. Now, this one here is perhaps a unique and amazing faction that you're going to find as well in Steam and Steel, and is one of the factions that perhaps is going to caught your interest more, because this faction is the Zulu Kingdom, so perhaps you can do some alternate history stuff in which the Zulu Kingdom wins against the British Empire. So let's have a look at this amazing faction here. This faction is an African faction, and as you can see, you can note a very different UI from all other factions. So we have the Asian factions, Islamic factions, Western factions. We know that they have different UI, but this one has this African style UI. It's very nice. So we have just one region and two generals, and the capital city is Lundi. The faction leader is King... I'm not going to say that, but it's very interesting actually, because we have a very small faction. You can see here, this is the king and this is the crown prince. No agents and just one settlement. But you cannot tell me otherwise. This is very interesting to have these guys over here. So, if you enjoy the content, if you enjoy my series of factions and starting positions, don't forget to give a like. Subscribe to the channel, don't forget. This was Victus. See you in the next one.